Am I the jerk for cutting ties with my parents because of my wife? My name is John, and I'm 34 years old. I grew up in a loving yet strict family where family bonds were always a top priority. My parents, Richard and Mary, pride themselves on always knowing best. I loved them, but their house was a place where my opinion rarely mattered. When I married Emma, I thought our life would be a harmony of two worlds. Instead, our families became a battlefield. It started with small things. At our wedding dinner, my mom told Emma that her dress was too simple for such an important day. Emma made a joke to brush it off, but I could see it hurt her. Then came the endless advice about our home, our work, even how we should have kids. My wife tried to be patient, but every visit to my parents ended with arguments between us. One day I did something I thought I'd never do. I decided that the next time my mom or dad said something hurtful, I'd stand up for Emma. But the situation escalated more than I expected. We went to my parents' house for Thanksgiving. Mom was cooking dinner, and everything seemed calm at first. During the meal, though, she asked Emma why she wasn't pregnant yet, adding something like, "John's biological clock is ticking too, you know?" That was the last straw. I firmly told her that such questions were inappropriate and that our family plans were nobody's business but ours. Mom went quiet, but later when Emma left the room, she told me I'd stopped being a good son. It felt like a punch to the gut. Until that moment, I thought I could keep everyone happy, but I realized then that the more I tried to hold both sides together, the more I was tearing myself apart. After that incident, I started calling and visiting less often. I thought I could just create some distance while maintaining contact, but my parents couldn't accept it. They called, sent messages, and asked why I had betrayed the family. They blamed Emma, calling her a manipulator. I didn't know how to handle it. Emma was suffering too. "I don't want to be the reason for a rift with your parents," she said, but the pain in her eyes made it clear. Letting my parents continue to interfere would mean betraying our life together. Then something happened that became a turning point. We decided to take a short vacation to escape all the drama. We went to the mountains and rented a house for the weekend. Those were the first peaceful days we had in a long time, but the calm didn't last long. On the evening of the second day, my father called me. His voice was tense, but he was trying to stay composed. "John, you've forgotten who you are and where your roots come from," he started, then added. "Your wife has isolated you, and we just want to bring you back to the family." I listened, but at some point I couldn't hold back and said, "Maybe the problem is that you never accepted Emma, not that she's manipulating me." It was the first time I openly accused them. My father went silent and then quietly said, "So you're choosing her over us?" Those words made me angry. "This isn't about choosing," I shouted into the phone. "It's about you respecting my life and my decisions." I ended the call without letting him respond. Emma noticed I was on edge. She came over, hugged me, and said that if I wanted to talk to my parents, she wouldn't object. "I don't want you to feel guilty because of me," she said, but I couldn't anymore. I was drained from this constant conflict. Every time I talked to my parents, it felt like they were more interested in proving they were right than trying to understand me. The next day, I sent my father a message. "I love you, but I can't continue our relationship unless you respect my decisions and my wife." The response was short, "We'll always love you, but we can't support your mistake." Those words stuck with me. Mistake. My wife, my life. Everything was a mistake to them. That was the turning point. I decided not to initiate contact anymore. I knew it would be hard, but I couldn't let them destroy my marriage. The first weeks of silence felt strange. I was used to the regular calls, the questions about how I was doing, my mom asking if I was eating properly. But over time, I started to feel relief. Emma was there, supporting me, and for the first time in a long while, we were able to build our life without outside interference. But soon things got even more complicated. My younger sister Sarah, who had always been closer to our parents, suddenly sent me a message. "John, are you really going to abandon us for her?" I stared at Sarah's message for a long time. She had always been the family favorite. 8 years younger than me, she grew up in an environment where my arguments with our parents were foreign to her. We never really fought, but we also weren't particularly close. Her message struck a nerve, because despite the complexity of our relationship, I didn't expect her to take our parents' side. I replied briefly, "Sarah, that's not true. I'm not abandoning anyone. But if none of you can accept my wife, how can I continue to maintain contact?" Her response came an hour later. "But this is family. Family should come first." That phrase triggered a wave of anger in me. I always believed that family wasn't just about blood. It was about respect, support, and understanding. Yet my parents, and now Sarah, were wielding the word family as a weapon. I decided to call her and explain everything. Sarah, I began trying to keep my tone calm. You know, I've always wanted you all to accept Emma, but every time you insult her or speak poorly of her, you make that impossible. I'm not choosing her over you. I'm choosing a normal, healthy life. Sarah was silent for a moment before saying, "What if you're wrong? What if she really is pulling you away from us? Have you even thought about that?" Her words made me reflect, but not in the way she intended. Instead of doubting Emma, I realized how deeply my parents and sister were manipulating me. They were trying to turn my desire to protect my wife into proof of her guilt. If she were really trying to distance me from you, she'd encourage me to cut all ties. But she doesn't. She's more concerned about me than you seem to be about either of us. Think about that, I said and hung up. Emma didn't ask what the conversation was about, but I could see her concern. I told her everything, and she just shook her head. "I never wanted it to go this far," she said, her voice full of regret. "Maybe we should try again?" Emma suggested inviting my parents over for dinner. "It'll be on our turf," she explained. "Let them see that I'm not the monster they think I am." I hesitated but agreed. We sent the invitation, and they accepted. Everything seemed too good to be true. The evening arrived, and Emma prepared a wonderful meal. She was doing everything she could to make it perfect. But it quickly became clear that my parents had come with very different intentions. "Well, John," my father said before we even began eating, "we came here to finally clear the air." I tensed, sensing where this was going. My mom added, "You do realize that family shouldn't put a spouse above parents?" Emma stayed silent, but I could see her gripping her fork tightly. I tried to steer the conversation in a peaceful direction, but my parents were resolute. "She's tearing our family apart," my mom said, staring directly at Emma. At that moment, Emma stood up. "I've kept quiet all these months," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I've endured your remarks, ignored your insults. All I've ever wanted was for you to accept us as a family. If you can't do that, then maybe the problem isn't with me, but with you." The room fell silent. My mom looked shocked. My dad didn't say a word. I looked at Emma and realized she had shown more respect than my parents had ever managed. The dinner ended before it even began. My parents left without saying goodbye. I looked at Emma clearing the plates and felt a mix of guilt and relief. I thought the drama was finally over. But a week later, I received a message from Sarah. "John, Mom fell ill after that dinner. I hope you're happy." Sarah's message threw me off balance. I didn't know how to respond. On one hand, her statement worried me. On the other, I was already used to my family using guilt as a tool for manipulation. All this time, I had been trying to maintain a balance between my wife and my parents, but the harder I tried, the worse things got. Emma noticed that I had been gloomy all day and asked what was wrong. I showed her the message. She read it and, as always, tried to approach the situation logically. "John, if something serious is really going on with your mom, you should call and find out. But if this is just another attempt at manipulation, you need to stop giving in." I realized she was right. So I picked up the phone and called my dad. He answered immediately, as if he'd been waiting for my call. "John," he began sternly, "your mother is in the hospital. She's had a nervous breakdown. She's barely slept or eaten since everything happened." I felt a wave of guilt, though I knew the situation wasn't so black and white. "How is she now?" I asked. My father explained that she was doing better, but the doctor had recommended rest and avoiding stress. At the end of the conversation, he said, "Maybe this is a sign that it's time for you to make things right." I hung up and started to reflect. Emma was right. I couldn't let them manipulate me through guilt anymore. But what if they really were suffering because of me? I felt trapped. The next day, I went to the hospital. Emma offered to come with me, but I declined. I needed to speak to my mom alone. When I entered her room, she looked pale, but as soon as she saw me, she started talking. "John, I've always wanted what's best for you. You were such a good son until she came along." Those words hit hard. Even here in the hospital, she couldn't let go of her narrative. I sat down by her bed and said, "Mom, I didn't come here to hear accusations. I came to check on how you're feeling." She continued in the same vein, ignoring my attempts to change the subject. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore and said, "Mom, if you can't accept Emma, we can't have a normal relationship. I love you, but I won't let you destroy my family." Her eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were genuine emotions or another attempt to pressure me. "So, you're choosing her," she whispered. Those words were the final straw. "Yes, Mom. If that's how you see it, then yes. I choose her because she's my wife and she deserves respect. If you can't give that, we can't stay in touch." I stood up and left, feeling everything inside me turn upside down. When I got home, Emma was waiting for me. She hugged me silently, and I felt the weight finally starting to lift. But it was not over. A few days later, I received a letter. A real, handwritten letter. It was from my father. In it, he detailed how I had broken our family, how my decisions were the reason for my mom's condition, and how I could still fix everything if I just came back. What do you think? Should I even respond to this letter, or should I just leave things as they are and move on? Write your opinion in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe.